I call the meeting to order. Christina, could you call the roll, please?
Ariel Fowler. Peter Vollison.
Here, I'm sorry.
Hi, Mariel. Peter Vollison. Cody Sexton. Dan Brew.
I'm here.
Megan Cronice.
Here.
Will Crawford.
Here.
Chris Chittum.
Here.
Mark Jameson. Ben Tripp.
Here.
Anita McMillan.
Here.
Nathan McClung.
Also here.
Dorian Allen.
Here.
Liz Belcher.
Here. Here.
Nathan Sanford. Dan Sonnenklaar. Michael Gray.
Here.
Here. I'm sorry.
Is that Dan? Dan Sonnenklaar. I
Yes,
see
it was me. I was on mute.
Okay, thank you. And our non-voting member, Kevin Jones. Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Christina. I will move us on to item 2 then, approval of the consent agenda items. There's several things on the consent agenda. I had them placed there really for the purpose of just trying to create some space later in the agenda, since I figured we'd be talking about a few of these things. Those items are A, the approval of the agenda itself, B, the minutes, C, the action on the work program, and D, the transportation needs assessment. If anyone wants to talk further about those, mechanically what we will need to do is move those out of the consent agenda, and then we can go on ahead with approving the consent agenda, and then we would discuss whatever that item was. But if everybody's cool with it, then we can also go ahead and just someone can move approval of the consent agenda items.
And this is Liz. I had a couple of requested box checks on some of the need stuff.
Okay. Do you want to talk about those? Do you want to talk about it more? Do you want to see if that got changed, or what are you asking, Liz? I'm sorry.
Well, I think I would need to mention it when we discuss that item and approve that item.
Okay, that's fine. Then we can pull D out. That's D, right? Liz, was it the needs assessment?
Correct.
Okay. Any issues with the rest of it?
Not for me.
Hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item D.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Chittum.
Second, Megan Cronice.
Thank you, Ms. Cronice. A motion and second. Do we need a roll call, or we can just say aye, or what, Christine?
We need a roll call, Mr. Chair.
If you could call the roll then.
Okay, and I noticed, I think a few more members have joined. I see Mark Jameson and Cody Sexton, correct? Has anybody else joined since I called roll call? Okay, so I'll call those members as well.
Then for those joining, Christine, I'm sorry to interrupt you. For those joining, we're on item 2, the consent agenda. We've removed item D, and the current motion on the floor is approval of A, B, and C.
Mariel Fowler.
Yes.
Cody Sexton.
Yes.
Dan Brew.
Yes.
Megan Cronice.
Yes.
Will Crawford.
Yes.
Chris Chittum.
Yes.
Mark Jameson.
Yes.
Ben Tripp.
Aye.
Anita McMillan.
Yes.
Nathan McClung.
Yes.
Dorian Allen.
Yes.
Liz Belcher.
Yes.
Dan Sonnenklaar.
Yes.
Michael Gray.
Yes.
Okay. And items 2A, B, and C have passed.
Thank you. We'll then move to 2D. Liz, did you want to elaborate on your questions about that?
Yes, I appreciate all the work that Christine and Rachel have put into this. I would like to ask that number 176, which is Tinker Creek Greenway, that we also check boxes in Botetourt County and Roanoke City, not just in Roanoke County. Right now it has boxes checked just for the county. So we need to add those other jurisdictions. This shows on the map, but that would be in the table. And then on 164, which is Roanoke River Greenway, we have a box check for safety, but not for access. So I would like to add a check in the access box. And then on the map itself, we show some sections that are not built, but we don't show others. So I would like on the map that we show the pieces that are not yet built, which would include Dugans to West Riverside, Rotary to Cook Drive, and the Materials Yard to Bridge Street. And then on Lick Run Greenway,
I'm sorry, may I interrupt for a moment, please?
Yes, ma'am.
I guess it's a lot being thrown at us at the moment, and I'm not sure if Rachel's able to pull up the table or the map so that we can actually look at what these records are saying, because I'm not able to follow the implications of what's being requested.
I'll try to get those pulled up. It'll take me a second.
Okay. And in terms of infrastructure requests that are not present, I guess we're not there at that stage in the process yet. We're only identifying needs. So anything that's infrastructure related, a project request specifically, would come in a later phase of this process and not be included as part of the needs assessment. These are just identifying the problems that are have been identified.
well, I do think they're identified in Appendix D of the Greenway plan.
We could follow up a little bit more with Ms. Belcher on some of her items, because I'm not sure that they fall in line with the needs assessment as it's been described and as it's been compiled, and if they're project-specific requests. Greenway plan, along with all of the other modal plans, pedestrian plan, bike plan, transit plan, corridor studies that all have project-specific recommendations will come to play at a later phase of this planning process.
Well, both those projects, Tinker and Roanoke River Greenway, are in the needs assessment, Christina. But I do think since you show it on the map as Tinker going to Botetourt, that it's good to have Botetourt checked.
Okay, and if it's a project that's been accidentally included, that's not a need, and so we could look at correcting that. But Rachel's trying to pull it up because I'm speaking about things and it's hard to speak about it without actually seeing the exact item.
So Christina, does this need to be passed today in order to move along to where it needs to be for the TPO?
That was our hope, Mr. Chair, was that we could, we've been working on this needs assessment now for, I think, at least half a year. And so we were hoping to move along with this because we're moving into other elements of the planning process and specifically going to be looking at prioritizing the needs, and anything that's project specific, how you might address a problem is, like I've said, going to be looked at a different phase, but we needed to be able to wrap up the current needs assessment so that we can look at the prioritization of the needs.
Sure.
And just to note that prioritization of needs is going to be different than prioritization of projects, which will come much later.
Yeah, I always have to remind myself that the needs are really sort of problems.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel.
Rachel, can you speak to this one specifically?
Got this on the Tinker Creek Greenway, and this one seems pretty easy. It's just in the map to make sure you said Botetourt and Roanoke City, that those two boxes are checked.
Correct.
And I think if this is indicating a project, so something that doesn't exist yet, if this is a line showing something that doesn't exist yet, then it's actually mistakenly placed in this needs assessment map, and we will place it in the project suggestions map, which we are developing, but we're not there yet. So if that was a mistake on our part, then I apologize for that.
So are you saying that you're changing what you've given us to review?
I guess I'm asking Rachel, it seems like that's a project, and because it doesn't exist yet, so it's not pointing to a problem. And I think we had talked about that recently, so I just wanted her to clarify.
So Christina, the need might be like pedestrian mobility or bicycle access or something like that in that area, and then the actual Greenway itself would, being a project, would be sort of in the solutions section to that need.
Yeah, and I can see, maybe Rachel can click on a few of those dots that are right around Hollins Road, like there's a safety need associated in that location, access for people not driving to get to a location there. So if the line that's shown there is a project, which is the proposed Greenway, then that would be a way to solve the issues that have been identified with access and people getting to those locations.
So I think for Botetourt, the need is bicycle pedestrian access to Botetourt and the Daleville area from the Roanoke area. And that's kind of how that line on the map shows up, Christine.
Okay, so when we do have there, as Rachel showing, that dot there shows the need for safer accommodations for pedestrians or less experienced cyclists to get there. So something other than riding a bicycle on 220 North to get up into Botetourt, or some other road, that some other access to ride a bicycle for people that are not comfortable riding on 220, for example, is desired. And so that need is identified in that point as people wanting to get to that place. And so the line, which is a proposed Greenway, is one way to accommodate that need and solve that need. And so it would be most appropriate to remove projects. Well, and hopefully there's not anything else that's on this map that's actually a project instead of a need. So, and to save that as a way to address the needs that are identified in other ways here.
I think I was actually looking at the line map, not just the points map.
I have them both. They're both on the map, and they're in the spread. They're both in the spreadsheet too. There's a line tab and a points tab.
Right. So I was just suggesting that in the spreadsheet, that particular line show up as multiple localities, not just one locality.
Yes, and I think we will include that with all the localities that it's relevant to that line, but move that line to the projects, the recommended projects, or projects to be considered, and then prioritized at another phase of this effort, and then remove the line because it is indeed a proposed project for how to address needs within the corridor. And so take it out of the needs assessment and then save it for the solutions and projects piece of the project. So that's 176 there, Rachel?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then 164 was which one?
The Roanoke River Greenway.
Okay, so similar rationale there. unless it's a problem that's identified with an existing piece of infrastructure, that need would be reflected here. Otherwise, then the need would be identified in other ways and then that infrastructure piece would be the solution to address the need.
So,
Christina, Liz, hold on just a moment if you don't mind. Christina, would it be possible, or what would you think about including, maybe is a better way to put this, existing Greenway trails, kind of like we have streets and things like that on here? Because it might be needs on them, I guess is what I'm wondering. I mean, I think some of this is terminology of, you know, what's shown and where it is and dots and all that kind of thing.
No, we haven't included any we've only got roads on here. We don't have bike lanes, sidewalks, trails, greenways,
Yeah, okay.
bus routes, any of that kind of stuff. We've got lines and dots to indicate where there are problems.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, Liz, go ahead.
well, my point in terms of 164 is that we need access from Roanoke City to Salem, and, you know, specifically from Bridge Street to Salem.
So do we have a dot
Bicycle
that
and
indicates that?
pedestrian access.
And the existing infrastructure that's present is not sufficient to accommodate people walking or riding their bikes from Bridge Street in the city of Roanoke to Salem, and thus some other access is needed that doesn't already exist.
Correct.
And so that infrastructure could be provided, it doesn't even need to be infrastructure necessarily, it could be something else, I guess, but
Point number 118 expresses that need for Bridge Street, and there's a point in Salem that I think expresses that need for Salem. They don't reference each other, so I could certainly add in, yeah. I could add that into the text for those 2 points. It's point number 112, so that they at least reference each other.
You're saying
can
it's
certainly do
1112
that.
and 118?
Well, 1112 is downtown Salem. Actually, there's other points in Salem. Well, that's not a good example. There may be other points in Salem that, like Green Hill Park, might be a better choice, or somewhere in Salem might. Anyway, so I think there's existing points already that I could just simply add a reference to, you know, being able to get here from Bridge Street, and then say on Bridge Street being able to get here from Salem.
Thank you, Rachel.
okay, so some cross-reference between records 112 and 118.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that the only change that I'm hearing?
And to, yeah, if we're going to remove point number 176,
Okay,
or lines 176.
okay, remove 176 and 164. Okay.
Liz, did you have anything else?
No.
All right. Anybody else on this item? All right, well then, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the needs assessment as amended.
So moved. It's Mark Jamison.
Thank you, Mr. Jamison. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Mariel Fowler.
Thank you, Marielle. Christina, could you call the roll?
Okay, Mariel Fowler,
Yes.
Cody Sexton,
Yes.
Dan Brew,
Yes.
Megan Cronice,
Yes.
Will Crawford,
Yes.
Chris Chittum,
Yes.
Mark Jamison,
Yes.
Ben Tripp,
Aye.
Anita McMillan,
Yes.
Nathan McClung,
Yes.
Dorian Allen,
Yes.
Liz Belcher,
No,
Dan Sonnenklaar,
Yes.
and Michael Gray.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That recommendation will go to the TPO.
Thank you, Christina. We'll move on then to item 3, chairman's remarks. I probably remarked enough at this point, so we'll just go on to item 4. Continued development of the Roanoke Valley Transportation Plan, future factors. Christina?
Okay, well, thank you. And it really is a continuation. We were just talking about the development of the Roanoke Valley Transportation Plan in terms of identifying the issues that we have in the region. We've been fortunate to have a team of folks through Cambridge Systematics that are helping us with the development of this plan. And you heard from David Jackson last month about future factors, many things to be considering as we look to what our region might look like in the year 2045, and how do we plan what our investments will be between now and then, and how might we best address the needs that we have identified are problems today, but then that might become problems in the next many years. And this really guides our efforts, our time, the investments that we'll have the opportunity to make over the next 5 years, and then we'll start this process over again of thinking to the future. And so today we want to continue the conversation about those future factors, and then start talking about the region's vision and our goals. And today we have from the Cambridge Systematics team, Vlad Gavrilovic, who's with EPRPC, along with Will Cockrell. And so I am happy to pass it over to Vlad.
Thank you, Christina. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to present this, and I'm going to ask Will Cockrell to tee up the slides. My internet went out apparently at this meeting, so I'm calling in by phone, but I have a copy of the slides here. Okay, can you all see the first slide?
Yes, we can, Vlad.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again. As Christina said, I'll be presenting on behalf of the Cambridge Systematics team. We've been working with Christina and her folks in development of this transportation plan update. And the purpose of today's briefing is to give you some input on the future factors, your voting and your survey that you took on the future factors, and then give you a first look at some of the draft goal language for your review in the coming days. Next slide. And since our last brief presentation with you back in December, we've been working with Christina's staff to lay out the approach for developing this plan over the next year or so. And that's what this graphic shows, and this was also provided as a handout is in your packet. And I'll just spend a little time walking through this so you can connect our presentation today with the activities on this graphic. So the journey so far, you can see the little running guy in April 2021 where we are today. But it started with the dark green elements, which focused on the current multimodal transportation needs within the region, what you all have been discussing, and the development of the needs assessment. So this work and the work of your Economic Development Stakeholders Committee provides a platform for the next steps of this plan, which is the light green. And these are the future factors, the vision, and the goals, and leading into developing a prioritization process for the needs. So really prioritizing the needs. And so this phase is really looking at current and future trends that will inform the plan goals and objectives, help prioritize the needs, and then ultimately move us into developing solutions. And that's the dark blue here in the next phase over the summer, and then going into a draft plan. Next slide. And last month we talked about the key trends for you to consider that could affect future travel demand and needs within the Roanoke region. And I know these are presented to you as kind of big picture global and national trends. However, when you look at these trends, they could really start to affect transportation in our region as we plan for the next 25 years. I just wanted to give you some, localize this a bit and give you some local examples of what these factors and trends might be. So in technology, for example, we can anticipate that broadband will continue. And this could mean a more distributed workforce, more people working at home. So that may mean fewer trips for services in the region. Another trend is vehicle electrification. Now that, of course, can mean air quality improvements, but it can also mean that we've got fewer gas tax revenues. You know, we move to electric vehicles, we've got less revenues from a gas tax. So when you look at society, another kind of future factor, obviously we've got an aging population in the demographics. What you know, changes does that incur? Maybe a better access to healthcare, maybe more transit or paratransit needs. We've already seen with the COVID impacts of shifting jobs away from large urban areas. Again, that might affect the region. Then when we look at economy, you know, there's some big national industry shifts away from manufacturing, away from retail as the impacts of e-retail. This could mean increasing difficulties finding skilled workers as the industries change, getting them to jobs. Projects like the 419 Town Center, you know, this could be a way of the future where we've got people able to work where they live where they work, more internal capture of trips. So those are things to consider. And then on sustainability, we're looking at, you know, increasing recurring flooding events like you've had in the Tanglewood area. This could increase kind of a need for parallel networks, have some redundancy in the system. Also electrification of vehicles, you know, we'll see that first with truck fleets transitioning to EV, so needing charging stations. And then finally, the big one, funding and finance. As you know, we're seeing project costs increase and funding flat. That limits the region's ability to pursue projects. We already talked about the impact on gas tax revenue. All these kind of imply a need for more cost-effective solutions. And there's some recent buzz on the national level about possible infrastructure funding, potential opportunity for the region. But really, they all kind of reinforce the need for this long-term planning as we're looking 25 years ahead to include some of these factors. Next slide. So you all did a survey, and this shows kind of the level of importance when we tallied up your results of each factor to the region's future. You can see funding and economy, you know, the dollar signs ranked at the top. But one of the things I want to emphasize here is that the spread is reasonably tight. You know, it's not like funding got 10 and sustainability got 1, but it's really a 8 on the high end, 6 on the low end. So it shows that these are all important factors. We want to take the results and our research and then put it into a report coming back to you in the coming month. So that'll be an important factor to consider as we develop this performance framework. Next slide. So those are the future factors, and now as we transition to getting a first look at potential goals, I wanted to first explain how we establish these goals and the basic principles. So the first and most important thing is we wanted to reflect your context. We don't want to start from scratch. We want to build on what you already have and build on relevant plans and as well as the needs assessment results. We need to consider the Virginia perspective, things like VTrans and Smart Scale as a reference, but you also need to have goals that really support your regional priorities here. Similarly, we need to acknowledge the federal planning factors. We don't need to directly align with them, but we need to make sure that they're somehow incorporated. And most importantly, we're looking forward and kind of what guides you and what do you want to look and feel like and how transportation wants to look in the future. And the one thing we added here was this kind of SMART framework. This is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time specific. This is a standard kind of approach to looking at goals and objectives to make sure that they're going to be measurable and that we can assess progress on these goals when we get down the line to projects. So as you'll see, we've added that. Next slide. Yeah, so this was kind of just looking at where you are today, your current transportation plan goals and vision. And what we did was just color code them to see what were the consistent themes in these. And as you'll see, the 6 goals you have here are, of course, reflected in your vision. The one that might be considered as a new goal that's in the vision but not in your current goals is this idea of being inclusive of all users. So some kind of equity or inclusiveness standard. And this is really what we're building on, is these 6 goals with maybe a consideration of a 7th. Next slide. What we did was look at how consistent are these across the general framework of federal, state, and regional goals, and just kind of color-coded these basic 7 themes: system preservation, economy, access, safety, reliability, environment, and equity. And, you know, the good news is that these are all kind of prevalent at all 3 levels, federal, state, regional. They are, have to say, from our work elsewhere and, you know, from federal and state work, they are the common ones that you tend to see. The wording of them is important and just their relevance to your region. But again, these are generally consistent with what we're finding elsewhere. Next slide. So now we want to give to you a kind of a first look at the potential goal frameworks. And what we've done here is listed the 7 themes on the left and some wording for these potential goals. You don't need to memorize these. These will be coming back to you in a survey, but let me just read through them and kind of give you a sense of what each one means. Under safety, we're trying to say that there's a future transportation system that is safe and secure for travelers on all modes. Under access, we want to improve the ability of residents and businesses to access opportunities for employment, commerce, education, recreation, and daily needs. Under system preservation, provide a well-maintained transportation system that is efficient and resilient to future changes. Under reliability, ensure a reliable transportation system that enables efficient movement for people and freight. On economy, support a growing and competitive regional economy through transportation investments. Under environment, protect the region's natural environment, conserve its natural resources, and be ready to recover during unexpected events. And finally, under equity, enable equitable access to destinations through greater availability of mode choices that are affordable and efficient and make equitable transportation investments. So again, these have been translated into actionable statements. They read similar to your existing goals, but they have these action verbs: provide, enable, maintain. And then we added that explicit goal of equity. We think this reflects kind of the perspectives we saw in the citizen survey. It's consistent with the federal state frameworks, your regional goals, and consistent with what you have today. Next slide. So you will not need to memorize this, as I said, because you will be getting a survey this month to kind of see if you agree with the wording, if you have any insights on particular refinements of the wording, and you know, some insight on priorities or really looking at how these goals are being implemented or have been implemented in the past. It might help us assess kind of priorities within them. We're going to compile the results and share the updates with you in May of this survey and use these to finalize the goals. And then these goals will be part of the process to create that needs prioritization framework to take us into solutions and then ultimately projects. So that was a whirlwind tour, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or go back to any of this.
Thanks a lot. We really appreciate that. Are there questions from the TTC? All right. Well, then we'll look forward to hearing more about it later. Thank you very much. Christine, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, sir, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Well, thanks again to our friends with Cambridge. I guess then we will move on to item 5. the recommendation on scenario for FY 2022 through 27-28 surface transportation block grant financial plan development. That's a lot of words. Christina?
Thank you. Last month, the TTC had provided a recommendation on how to develop the financial plan for the Sdbg funding to the board. And since that time, we had a couple more pieces of information come in. And I think this is kind of a never ending process. And so at some point we have to put an end and move on and then revisit it again in the next cycle. So we have been asked to bring this back to you by the board because of the additional information. They were not feeling comfortable to put numbers to projects at their last meeting and then put that out for public hearing. So we're hoping to get to that stage with the TPO at their next meeting, which is why we're back looking for a new recommendation on how to develop the financial plan from this body. And a variety of information and scenarios have been provided in the staff report. And of course, because time keeps moving, since then I've had further conversations with VDOT. They have had to make some assumptions because the draft 6-year improvement program is being put together and they had deadlines to meet. And so there were some assumptions that they had made and they have come up with some numbers and I just received them this morning. And so I'm still going through those numbers and checking. There are a lot of formulas in all these spreadsheets. And so I don't want to get bogged down in the exact numbers at this point. This will be back to the TTC next month with hopefully the final complete numbers, and hopefully we won't continue to have evolving pieces of information coming in. So I'm looking for input and direction so that we can take this to the policy board this month with a recommendation on a scenario. And that's basically looking at priorities. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of projects that are experiencing cost overruns and money resources going down. And so with this funding source, and several of these projects have multiple funding sources on them, with the Sdbg funding source, there's only a certain amount available. And unfortunately, because I just got new information from VDOT this morning, I can't tell you what exactly that number is. So the best information that I have is what I had shared with you at the last meeting. But since then, after these conversations, it seems that the funding that was desired to be returned from Roanoke City for the Roanoke River Greenway, City of Salem line to Bridge Street, which was $750,000. VDOT is still reviewing those numbers, and it seems like that will be less because some of that money, the project's completed, and so the project is going through financial closeout, and so not all of that will be able to be returned. And so it's my recommendation that we don't even consider that funding at this time, and that will become, whatever that amount comes out to will be available in the next year's cycle. So hopefully there'll be some money in balance entry for next year's consideration of project funding requests. The city had also asked for money for the Tinker Creek Trail extension. So that was $1,589,254 that the TTC did not have that information last time. And then the town of Benton has also adjusted its request for the Walnut Avenue bicycle and pedestrian accommodations from Wesley Avenue to First Street. And so that request has gone up to $336,110. So some different pieces of information, and the board wanted some direction on priorities, and given the schedules that projects have, most of these are wanting to go to construction over the next few years. And so everyone's needing money at the same time. And there's not enough money over the next few years, as we know it today, to accommodate all of those funding needs through the Sdbg funding source. So hopefully this group today can talk about the projects and the schedules and come up with a prioritized list of projects or strategy for how to approach giving. There will be some money in Sdbg, but I don't know exactly what that amount is. But we need to look at how do we prioritize the cost overruns, if at all. Certainly these projects were scored and prioritized in their original rounds, given the scope that was presented for the funding that was requested at that time. And so there's certainly no commitment at all from the TPO to address any of the cost overruns with RVTPO funds. Ultimately, when the localities sign the agreement with VDOT to continue with the projects, certainly when the localities accept the cost estimates from VDOT or whoever it is that's developing the cost estimates for them, there is a risk associated in that acceptance on the locality's part to assume any financial burden above and beyond what is known at that time. And certainly Sdbg or other funding sources, to the extent that they can, might be available to help with those cost overruns, but ultimately it is made known in those project agreements that it is the locality's ultimate responsibility. So I've talked a bunch already, and so I'm happy to answer any questions and look for the committee's feedback and direction on how we want to go about prioritizing these projects.
And Christina, if I could just talk a little bit more here.
Okay.
Kind of adding to what you said, I want to make sure that I understand correctly. When we were at, and Michael, I think you were there too, when we were at the TPO last time, there were some new projects which had come in, or some new projects which came in, which were not part of our original recommendation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And for the group, do you have those handy to tell them which ones those are?
Yes, well, it's just the new one was the Tinker Creek Trail extension for a little over 1.5 million, and then the updated request from Walnut Avenue bicycle and pedestrian accommodations.
Thank you. So those came in after we had considered the scenario previously. And I think the TPO wanted us to look at, there were more, those didn't get scored, quote unquote, before, along with the other things that were in our recommendation. And also, I think we had some updated numbers from VDOT, which were lower than we thought they would be when we were at the TTC. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, so like I said, we've gone back and checked the numbers, but there's pieces of the puzzle keep shifting.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah. And
so
the
last time we talked, I think that there was going to be enough money to do everything and have a little left over. And now you're saying that's not probably the case. Is that what we're hearing?
I guess what's been the case is that there's not enough money in the time frame that people wanted.
Okay. But in the overall program, there is that? Maybe.
Like I said, I just got some new information this morning from VDOT. And so I just need to look at the numbers more. But it doesn't change the guidance that we're needing in terms of priorities on whose request is more important to address with Sdbg versus asking them to find funds from other sources.
Sure.
And so without maybe necessarily talking about the numbers as much right now, it's just talking about the priorities. And if there's funding, and then also the project schedules, knowing that there isn't enough money to accommodate everyone's request when they want it. And so if somebody were willing to wait 6 years, then we could look at FY27 or 28 funds for some of these projects, but I'm not sure that that's what folks are wanting to do.
Mm-hmm. And I think the TPO asked us to look at what was ready to go to construction, what the time frame for the projects were, and to prioritize the projects that were in the list. And the projects in the list are semi-prioritized already, right? Based off of when they were submitted and how they were scored and that kind of thing.
Based on the original scopes and the original cost estimates.
Yeah.
A project that's now asking for twice as much as what it was originally may have been scored and prioritized differently in the original round. So it's a little bit different now.
Right. Thank you.
I think I might just share my screen because I've kind of typed out some stuff that might help with the thought process here. So let me go ahead and do that.
While you're doing that, Michael, is there anything you wanted to add to that? I know that some of the others, you and some others, were at the TPO meeting. I just want to make sure we all understand what.
No, I mean, I
trying to
think
do.
you kind of hit it, Ben. You know, kind of the general gist there. You know, the issue really is, you know, we have so much money and we have so many requests coming in. So now the question is, I think as we stated a couple of times already, which projects do we give money to and when do we give it to them? And you know, my thought is, this is how we approach it within VDOT, is the projects that are going to add, you know, this year or next year, you know, we're going to make sure the projects going to add this year have money. And the second tier of projects would be the ones next year, and then the year after, and the year after, and the year after. So, you know, our goal with VDOT is to deliver projects and get them built. So, and I would hope that would be the goal of the TPO as well. So, you know, I think information that would help us is when does the schedule for each of these projects, you know, show it going to add, you know, show it going to, you know, going to construction. And, you know, are any of these projects going to be split up, or are there different phases that, you know, maybe one of these projects or two of these projects cover something that's really going to be multiple phases delivered? That might be good information to know as well. And then when would they need money associated with that? So, Christina?
Yeah, all right, so let me go through what I have on the screen here. Because there's some things that just, they're commitments and now they're going to be parts of the financial plan. So this top one actually, based on the information that I had gotten from VDOT this morning, I need to look at this one more closely because it's showing that there may be some funding coming back to the TPO from closeout of this exit 140 park and ride reconstruction. So I need to follow up with that. But essentially this project is completed, and as it was told to me by VDOT, that it could be removed from the financial plan. So we'll go ahead and remove it, but then see what funding may be coming back to the TPO from that. But I don't know when I'll know for sure that information. So the next one here are the smart scale projects. So those ones have been successful in this latest round. So those are all commitments. Some of those had been conditionally committed, and so then those will be commitments. This last one we've heard from the county to go ahead and return it to the pot for the Route 46220 project. So those ones are kind of are set in my mind. The next ones here, I put not now, will be considered in next year's plan development, which is this return of money from the Roanoke River Greenway, City of Salem to Bridge Street project. That project is complete. And so it's going through the financial closeout. And so it's not looking like it's going to be $750,000. It's going to be something less. And that exact amount is not known at this time. So it's my recommendation that we don't consider that money now, but know that something will be coming back next year for allocation to a project. This next one is a little bit different in that this one has not gone to construction yet. And the county is downsizing this project based off of the challenges that they've had with right-of-way acquisition. So they've proposed to return $2.7 million back to the TPO from this Sdbg funding. And so the total funding would only be 1.5 for those reduced, the reduced project scope. So this one, VDOT is comfortable with accepting that return, given that the county has offered to do that. That does raise a concern in my mind, though, of it hasn't gone to construction yet, and we're seeing cost overruns with all these other projects, and not knowing will there be a request sometime in the future then, once it goes for construction bids, and so that's a concern of mine. Then really
Christina, this is Megan. I just wanted to add, we do anticipate going into construction on that piece this year.
Yeah.
So these are the best numbers we have. We're doing the best we can, and we think we're good to build the pieces that we have for East
Okay.
at this time.
And so then that is a choice from the locality to go with a reduced scope, to go with reduced cost, and to give the money back to the TPO before construction. So any cost overruns then would be the responsibility of the locality, with the possibility that there could be an additional funding request in the future for this project, back to the Sdbg if things don't work out the way they are planned at the moment.
Mr. Chairman, this is Anita with the Town of Vinton.
Go ahead, Anita.
Apologize, like Christina said, we got that revised estimated cost a week after the TTC meeting, and that is based on the 50 design plan that costs, and we are ready to have the scheduled advertisement for that Walnut Avenue project is September 2022. So we are moving along on that project. As far as the gas need, that increase is based on the cost estimate provided by Salem District. And, if we are to administer that project ourselves, we hope that, we definitely should be sufficient with that total increase. Having said that, we are ready to move on that project, especially with the 2 grant funding that we received for the redevelopment of Gish Mill. So as far as the town are concerned, those 2 projects for the town are ready to go.
Thank you, Anita.
So
Ms.
Ben,
Finn?
this is Liz.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Liz.
So I think it's worth mentioning, since Christina has this on the screen right now, that Roanoke County, in making this decision to return the 2.7, realized that they were $3 million over budget on the west end on the combo project of the county and Salem. And they didn't feel like they could just come back and ask for $3 million. So they were trying to make it palatable to swap the money from one end to the other end. And if in fact the TPO is not willing to do that, the county probably would choose to keep that 2.7 to cover any overruns they might have on that east end piece. So they really were looking at the fact, okay, we're over budget over here. This is closer to construction. We need to advertise by fall. How can we cover that? And so they were willing to reduce the scope on the east end in order to help cover the increase in cost on the west.
Thank you, Liz. I think we have a couple things that are in that situation. If we could come back to these 2 things, let me go ahead and get Christina to finish walking us through this. But yes, let's all keep that in mind for the discussion to come. Okay, Christina?
Okay, so these ones that are in black, A through F, are the additional funding requests. So these are the projects that are experiencing cost overruns. And they are all needing money around the same time. And so the money that we're seeing, whether it's VDOT's numbers or the numbers that we've been crunching, there's money available immediately in previous allocations, or there's money available in like FY27 or FY28 if the group recommends allocating funds from that pot at this time. But for VDOT's purposes, they only look at the allocations through FY27. And anything beyond that is shown in their system as a responsibility by the locality. So we've already talked about each of these projects. They're the same numbers, and C shows that updated amount for the Walnut Avenue project. And those are shown in the original prioritized order, though again, the scoring and the priorities were determined based off of lower amounts. So then the last two, G and H there, the other ones are looking to the future and looking to commit or conditionally commit funding for projects in FY28, which can be considered the TPO's play money because it's not reflected in the 6-year program. And the idea behind looking at year 7 was based off of the good experience that the TPO had last year with conditionally committing funds from year 7 towards smart scale projects, of which 4 out of the 5 did receive smart scale funding. So that was the idea behind year 7, was to kind of have that cushion play money. And so next year's play money will include FY29 as well as the new year 7. So just to keep that in mind, is there a desire to go ahead and commit some of these funds in these later years to these projects now, commit or conditionally, or wait and see what the next round of applications come in as and have more money available, less money tied up, to see what the priorities are during that process. So I guess to Liz's comment about I guess different localities, project sponsors, strategizing, funding. This is the region's pot of money. And so money is given to a project, not to a project sponsor. And so while it may work out that, oh, money from this project sponsor's project might then be reallocated to a different project from that same project sponsor, there is this whole other mix of needs out there that need to be considered when money is being returned. And so it's not an automatic project sponsor funding because the projects were selected with the mix of available funding and projects that were being offered to the TPO at that time. And there may be other priorities when it comes down to each financial plan's development. So the point is the money's not given to the project sponsor, it's given to the region's best projects. And so if there are any questions about that, just let me know, but we can continue this conversation about the priorities.
So Christina, do we know the total ask and the total funding over the period that we're programming the money?
So on the like on table 3 in the staff report at the bottom right, there's the total funding requested, which is all of those in red, is $9,043,221.
And the amount of funding that we have? I know it keeps changing.
Well, yeah, and it's different from what was provided in the staff report based off of new information received today.
Sure.
I think that the key here is that it's not available, money's not available when folks need it.
I understand, but I just want to know, like, do our wants exceed our our abilities?
Looking at this, I would say that the wants and the abilities are pretty close if we use all of FY28.
Okay, so what do you have an updated total funding figure?
I do not.
Okay, but we think they're pretty close
at the moment.
All right, so then was there, and I apologize, Christina, was there more that you wanted to talk about on this page or another page? I'm not trying to get us ahead of ourselves.
No, this is the end of this. I think the focus here was looking for priorities of which funding requests to meet given the little that's available immediately. And
Okay.
my numbers and VDOT's numbers are similar. Both of them are under $2 million.
Okay. So let's maybe then, as we think about this, break it down a little bit. I mean, we have the ability, we think, or to come real close to it, right? To fund all the projects and any cost overruns and move the money around like everybody wants and do everything with, but it'll take all of the money that we have through 28 or thereabouts. Is that right?
I believe so.
Okay. So that's possible, folks, but that leaves no money for any smart scale fishing expeditions or match or whatever you want to call it in the future. Now these numbers might change, right? I mean, right now things have gone down. Well, they may go up next year or at some point in the future, and we find ourselves with more money, or we could be back doing this again. So I think there's kind of an early decision point here of, do we feel like we should leave any money from 28 for the TPO or the region to use to match against smart scale projects? And I'd like to open the floor to thoughts on that question first before we get kind of further into this. So what I'm asking is, does the group sort of favor allocating all the money to cover all the projects that we have here, or do you feel like we should hold some back? That's an open question.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sexton.
How are you today?
I'm peachy keen. Yourself?
Just wonderful. Getting better by the minute. I had a clarifying question based on what you said, because in looking at the calendar, it looks like what's at issue isn't simply the next round of smart scale, but we have another round of Sdbg projects coming, or applications coming up in the fall as well. So wouldn't we need money to fund those next projects as well?
Might be a good question for Christina. Would you like to chime in on that?
So next year, the 6-year program that will be developed is FY23 through 28. So that's what will be programmed for VDOT and DRPT. It is, if the TPO wants to look at year 7, that will be FY29 next year.
Okay.
So that sounds like technically no, we would not. Is that right, Christina? Because 29 is outside of what we, I mean, we could program 40 years of funding if we wanted to, right? But VDOT's only going to look at 6 or so.
6 years is what VDOT will look at, 6 years.
So if we do use all of the money up now, then what would, I mean, how would you think we would handle that? Now, we're just speculating, but like, how would we handle the new application cycle?
I anticipate still having a full new application cycle because we don't know how money will adjust a year from now.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Sexton?
It does. It does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Go ahead. Who is that?
This is Mark Jamison.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson.
To your original question, it's no secret to this group that I feel very strongly that we need to reserve some funds to account for smart scale applications. We have not yet completed the update of the TED study. Arguably, there's going to be something that will come out of the TED study that the region will have deemed to be important. And obviously, we have Sdbg applications coming up once again. My recollection is that when we went to year 7 last time, that was to conditionally commit money to leverage against smart scale project. And that was the extent to which we dipped into year 7. To me, it's a little risky to continue to look out beyond the 6-year program that we know that the funds are available, because we keep kicking the can down the road and there's no room for any subsequent projects. I mean, at this point, what I think I'm hearing is that we have new information that was received this morning that hasn't really been vetted thoroughly, that information needs to be gone through. We have at least unknown to me, the exact construction schedules. And then we've got to try to then prioritize based on those construction schedules for the money that's available to us right now. I don't know how we can make that recommendation today in the absence of some of that information in terms of trying to decide what our project priorities are. We just have too many moving pieces at this point in time.
Thank you, Mark.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Gray.
I'll just add on kind of a little bit to what Mark was saying there. From VDOT's perspective, there's no requirement that a TPO, whether it be this one or any of them around the state, develop their Sdbg program on the same time frame that we do our 6-year program. It's desired in terms of being able to, show the latest thing that was approved by the MPOs in the latest 6-year program. But if we're able to do something today, that's fine, and move it towards the TPO. If not, if it takes another month or two or whatever, that's fine as well. I mean, we amend things into and in projects that are in the 6-year program the day after it's approved. So I guess what I'm saying is, if we don't have enough information today, we can always take our time to go through it and try to make the best decision we can. There's no, I guess, from our standpoint, there's no deadline that y'all have to have it done, now or next month.
Thank you. That's helpful. Anyone else?
So Ben, this is Liz. I'm looking at table 4. It looks to me we've already got 2 million of conditional money in there. And if we're not going to make that decision now, that would take out that 2 million. That's based on a future smart scale application.
Christina, do you want to comment on that? Or Michael?
It was about FY28 funding.
Correct. It's in purple. So it was in purple, I think, to differentiate, because it was conditionally committed to the super street based on successful smart scale, but it wasn't successful smart scale. So there was a request to just bump it out and they would apply again. But if we're not considering any of the smart scale applications now, then that would put that money back in the pot.
Yes, that's an option. Yeah, Botetourt County has requested that the conditionally committed funding, be dedicated in FY28. So that's ahead of any other conditionally committed funding request that might come in the next round of Sdbg. So it is up to the TPO and this group to recommend if you desire to have that conditionally committed funding applied now to that project, or ask them to resubmit and consider it at a future time. I think based off of the questions that we've been getting about the construction timeframe, I'm going to add here what I understand to be the latest of when each of these projects A through F would need their construction funding. And I'll put down these fiscal years, but I don't know that they matter, because they all need money between now and FY25, and it's the same amount of money. So the fact that one's going to construction sooner, maybe if that one got the money, then hopefully next year the funding forecast would improve, and then a project that needs money the following year, maybe situation would improve for that project, is probably the thinking here. So I'm going to put these fiscal years down. Maybe that'll help the group.
Well, and that might be the best we can do really with it.
So, and project sponsors, if you're seeing something different than what I'm putting down, feel free to correct it.
That one's not correct, Christina. They're looking to go to add in the fall of calendar year 21.
I think this is a little confusing too, because it's not when they're going to construction, it's when the money would be needed, and money would be needed within 12 months of construction end. And so those are the dates that I'm putting down here, is the latest of when funding could be programmed for that project in order to meet its construction schedule.
So are you saying if the construction is to be advertised by September 2022, that's why you put fiscal year 23?
Yes, because
For
the
that one
following year, the money could be programmed by the following year.
Okay.
But doesn't this go back to the difference between VDOT and the localities? We've had this before, that the localities need the money in order to go to construction. They have to already have it, not have it projected. Mark, you might speak up to that in terms of the locality rules, but it was my understanding that they had to have it, not have it in the future.
I mean, my recollection is that when the city awards the project, the money's got to be in the account. Does that answer your question, Liz?
Yeah, so I think that's different from how VDOT does it, Christina. So for the localities, they need it to be in the account to award the project. So if Roanoke County on A, we're going to advertise in the fall and try to let that contract, they have to have the money in the account before they let the contract. So that's fiscal year 22.
Would any of the project sponsors like to speak up on when they're going to advertisement? And I have those dates in a spreadsheet somewhere else, but I'm not able to get it at the moment.
Hey, this is Michael.
Mr. Gray, go ahead.
Yeah, Mark, when you say it has to be in the account, like you have to show that you have the money, is that the city's money? Because this works on the reimbursement request, so you're not going to have it until you actually send in the reimbursement and get paid for the work.
That's correct. The money has to be allocated into the account, but it is reimbursable as I understand it. So we essentially float it up front and then request reimbursement.
That's the way we do it as well.
The same is Vinton. And then for that Gasnik, Christina, will be fiscal year 23 too.
Thank you.
So Liz or maybe Megan, I'm sorry, yeah, the A, if we go to construction, what did you say, Liz, in the fall of 21?
Right, which would be fiscal year 22.
Right.
Okay.
By the end of this calendar year.
So how long do we anticipate construction taking? At least a year, right?
At least a year, if not a year and a half.
So are you all, I mean, if you're like us, you'll probably reimburse a little as you go along, I'm guessing.
Yes, that's part of the requirements. And we had a meeting with Christina and Jay several weeks ago where we talked about the project schedule and when the funding would be needed by the end. So we discussed when money could be pushed out instead of having for A, everything isn't previously allocated. So we do have some flexibility with where that funding can go, but we need to be ready to go to construction by the end of this year on A.
So has your board allocated the money for construction?
Not yet.
You're waiting on
I mean,
us,
not
I'm guessing.
all of it. We're still looking for money, so we need to get everything into place. But we have, as we've gotten more money for the project as we've gone along.
Okay.
We seem to always have new Appendix A's. I have 2 on my plate right now for other projects. The other project on this list of ours that will go to construction by the end of this year should be F. But Orange Market is several years out, and that one we can push if it helps.
All right, well, just to bring us then back to the task at hand, do you guys want to get more information on when the projects need to go to construction and kind of firm that up with Christina? And while we wait on a new funding total amount to consider this further, or do you want to undertake prioritizing, if you will, which we probably could go ahead and do while we wait on the rest of that stuff, and then kind of see how that shakes out with how much funding we have left?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Finch.
I guess what I'm hearing is that maybe there are 4 projects here. So A, C, E, and F that between now and next June would be going to construction and would like to see full funding for their projects. They can't wait until next year's adjustment to take place.
So Christina,
correct?
I actually talked to Luke today about Tinker, and he is going to construction in the fall of 2021, but that construction is using a different source of money, not Sdbg money. So he expects to need that additional money when he goes to add September 23rd, 23. So he's got 2 phases that are funded in with other sources and with the previous allocations.
Yes. So the Tinker project has 3 phases, and this funding is needed for the 3rd phase, the last phase. And that's why it's shown as FY25. So B and D, I'm hearing, need money later. A, C, E, and F need money now.
So, hey, this is Michael. Can I speak again?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is very good information that we're getting at here. One of the things that I don't know that we have dug into in terms of if a project needs money earlier or later is some of the existing projects. I know if you look at our list, a lot of them that are existing projects are the ones that are asking for money here. But we do have a few other projects that are on the list that either have previous money or money in somewhat earlier years. And honestly, I just don't know the status of them. So I don't know if, there's any availability with those projects to swap money and move out or anything like that. And the ones that come to mind are, the Divergent Diamond, the bridge across Barnhart Creek, Greenway Explorer Park. Are any of those projects, because they all have previous money on them and money in 22, 23, somewhere up in that area. Is there any way to look at those schedules to see if there's any way to shift money out on any of those and shift the money up to some of these other ones, the A, D, E, and F, to help get those projects money earlier? Because if not, I don't know that we just have any money available early in the plan. And there might be other projects. That's the only ones I'm looking at right now. So.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, this is Megan.
Go ahead, Megan.
We talked about that with Christina and Jay too. We talked about all of our county projects. I think we decided for the DDI, which is the virtual public hearing is going to be on June 29th of this year. It's moving along well with construction advertisement in 24, that money was fairly well placed. But we did have an opportunity with the Explorer Park Greenway to push the 22 funding out to 23. So we did identify some flexibility when we talked about that, in mid-March, and we're happy to allow funding to go where it needs to go as long as our schedule doesn't change, if that helps.
Thank you.
So Ben, I could speak to Barnhart.
Go ahead, Liz.
Barnhart Creek Bridge is under construction. The bridge will be set first week of May, and the project will be finished the first week of June. So I don't think we can move that money.
That's correct.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, just to speak to the possibility of moving Explore Park money, we need to be able to move money. There's no money right now in FY23 to move Explore Park money into FY23. So the ability of a project to shift funds around, something else needs to also move. And so table 3 was a proposal for how to adjust money in order to balance the budget. Now that assumed some other things which may not be possible, such as the Bridge Street Greenway segment not returning as much money. So I'm not sure, even if a project can move money, if we will be actually be able to accommodate shifting money around, because there just is no money there to shift around in order to add more money into this plan. If that makes sense.
So Christina, what do you need from us here?
So, I mean, so I'm seeing that we have 4 projects, A, C, E, and F, which need money the soonest. And according to both my numbers and VDOT's numbers, there'll be less than $2 million available immediately to accommodate those requests. And so we need a priority. Do any of these requests get funded out of Sdbg? If so, what's the priority? Because the available money immediately, as we know it right now, is not sufficient to even accommodate A. It could potentially accommodate C, E, and F, and some of A, but that exact amount, I'm not sure. And then we could look at programming B and D in a later year, such as FY27, and either the localities continue to search for money, or we hope that next year's financial forecasts are positive so that project schedules can be moved up. But right now we've adjusted the funding as shown in table 3 as best we can, and even VDOT's draft 6-year program information shows the same thing, that there's just no money between FY22 and FY26. There's money in previous allocations or in FY27 or 28.
Does the scenario you described, funding C, E, and F, include the return of the 2.7 from Roanoke River Greenway that I believe the county wants to move to A?
Yeah, so those are distinct recommendations. There's a recommendation to accept the return of the 2.7 million. And then there's a decision to be made about what to do with the balance entry funds in the 6-year financial plan, which includes that 2.7 if that were to be returned. If that's not going to be returned, and if that's not, then that's a whole nother thing that we'll be looking at. And probably no money will be available immediately.
Well, folks, how do you want to proceed?
Well, it seems to me like Michael is the expert on juggling money and fiscal years. And so it would seem to me like our best bet is to get, number one, some confirmation from the localities, from their contracting finance people, about whether it can be committed money or whether it has to be at the time they add. So we need a little clarification there from contracting and purchasing departments in the localities, because at least 3 people have expressed the opinion that the localities are doing a little bit different than VDOT does. And then maybe sit down with, one person from each locality and and with those schedules and Michael and play with the spreadsheet.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Mark.
Go ahead, Mark.
I concur. I don't know how we can, I mean, I can't personally feel very comfortable with voting to approve something right now because it just looks like there's some work that needs to be done to vet either a year of expenditure or the exact dollar amounts that are available. And it just feels like there's some more work that needs to be done before we can actually have a firm recommendation.
And
Okay.
To those points, the firm recommendation won't come until next month, is according to the current schedule, when we look at the whole financial plan. The purpose of putting together these draft financial plans is to show how things might turn out. And so there needs to be some kind of a scenario given in terms of priorities because there isn't enough money to accommodate everyone's immediate requests. And so if a project needs to be shown as fully funded, then we need to be programming money into those later years and hoping that that money can get moved up. Otherwise, the project will just be delayed if it's going to be funded with Sdbg. And so it's continuing to spend time on the tables is what we plan to do for next month. But we need to know, is that money going to be returned, the $2.7 million from the Greenway? Because there was a suggestion that maybe it wouldn't be returned. We just keep changing the story. And we need to know all the pieces before we can start putting things together.
Does anyone object to the idea that the county would return the $2.7 million and our recommendation would be then to allocate that to A? Does anybody have an issue with that?
Well, I do not have an issue with that, but depending on, there are a few projects that is, like EF, we are ready. Yeah, those are ready to be, hopefully by spring or fall of next year, we're ready for advertisement. So having said that, I don't have any issue with that as long as we, like Christina said, some of the projects are ready to be advertised, since we are in the 50% design plan right now. So that's way we can get that commitment. We get additional funding to make sure that we are able to advertise it. So as far as the town of Vinton, is on reimbursement basis. We do not have to have that money when we advertise it, as long as we know that, we do partial reimbursement. We're not paying like one lump sum to the contractor. So.
Thank you, Anita. And just to clarify, guys, what I'm thinking is, how can I do kind of what Mark and Liz have suggested here, but also give staff some direction about how to do this that will give them some priorities to work with when we put this together. And as I understand it, Christina, we can probably do C, E, and F with the $2 million that we have. But to do A, we're going to need this money from the other Greenway project. Am I understanding that correctly?
Mr. Chair, in order to do any additional funding request, you have to take advantage of the money that's being returned.
Okay, so there's not that the 2.7. We need to use the 2.7 to fund some of these other things. It's not that we can only use. We'll have other money to do the ones that are not A.
Right, within the timeframes that they want. Otherwise, they're looking at FY27 money.
Okay. Well, I'm not hearing anybody who necessarily is opposed to doing that. That is taking the 2.7 and moving it to A, but as Anita pointed out, it may affect the scheduling. But Michael, I think you suggested that maybe there's some other projects we could take a look at and see if we can find some money in there. There's some of the ones that have been previously funded that there might be some flexibility that we could push out a little bit, and it would give us flexibility in those years.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I've been working with Jay Guy, and we've been looking at all the numbers, and we can continue to do that and incorporate Michael more in those conversations. The fact is that each fiscal year has decreased its funding by over $500,000 from what was last approved. And so the money has to be balanced somewhere. So either other projects are going to have their schedule shifted out in order to balance the budget, or the return of funding is going to help keep other projects on schedule, and then also used to address the additional funding requests from projects. So we're needing to balance the budget, which was the attempt of table 3, was to first balance the budget with the acceptance of return of money. And then from there, look at how additional funding requests might be addressed. So just going off of that table 3, there was $2.4 million available in previous allocations. If we subtract the $750,000, if that's not going to be the case from the city's Greenway project, so then we have 2.4 minus 750,000, and that's keeping all the other projects pretty well on schedule.
Can you put that on the screen? I'm sorry.
Okay.
That might be helpful.
Okay. It's small, I'm sorry. All right, are you seeing your table 3? Okay, so what I was saying is that this amount down here, 2.4, is what we have calculated as being available, taking into account these 2 projects returning funds. Now, one of them we can't take into account at this time, and that extra $750,000 is no longer available. And so this 2.4 down at the bottom would be 2.4 minus $750,000, which is available in previous funds. And that's balancing the budget, considering all of the project schedules that for all of the projects that are listed here, and not incorporating any additional funding requests yet. So if we take 2.4 minus 750,000, that's what, give or take a little, is available in previous allocations, available immediately to support projects. Otherwise, we're looking at money in FY27 or FY28 if you want to go into year 7.
All right, folks, do you want more information before we prioritize, or do you want to try and take a look at that now? That's the question, I think.
So doing that math, 2.4 minus the 750,000, I get 1.7 million available in previous allocations, assuming the acceptance of return from the county's Greenway project.
Mr. Chairman, this is Cody.
Mr. Sexton?
Very nuts and bolts question, but that's what we are, technical people.
Right.
Christina, the 220 Super Street, can you, is that sitting in a previous allocation, the 924,000?
No, that's allocated in FY24.
Okay, so moving it won't help. That's my question.
Well, moving it to FY27 could help some project.
Could it help one of the projects that we have reached an impasse, on which we have reached an impasse?
As I was showing on that other screen, all of those projects need money between now and FY25. So it would support, and with additional juggling of maybe the DDI project, putting more money there and taking some out of previous allocations, that's possible. That might give some additional money. Yes.
I mean, I'm not completely sure that we would be ready to go on that project even in FY24 prior to learning the results of the next round of Smart Scale. That'd be my only concern. So I wish you had said FY25 or FY26 instead of 27, but so yeah, I just want to throw that out there for the group. I'm not, you know, FY24 is great, but I think still not knowing what the next round of Smart Scale would bring on that, you know, I think Botetourt could be flexible on that. If it helps the puzzle.
Thank you, Mr. Sexton. Okay, folks. So, I mean, a couple of you indicated you wanted to see more information and kind of play with some scenarios. Is that what you're thinking, or you want to try and prioritize some things? What do you think? Just trying to keep us moving.
Mr. Chair, for me, yes, I think we need some more information, and a smaller group of folks who include Michael Gray and the folks at VDOT need to take another look at this. I mean, it certainly sounds like there's some projects that need to be moved out because we cannot fund all of them in the first or the next 3 years. So
Okay.
the group needs to vet that and look at hard construction schedules to the extent we can do that. And we'll revisit this next month. I don't see us being able to prioritize on the fly today.
Thank you. Christina, does that work for you
Yes.
time-wise?
Yep. We won't be able to share anything with the TPO at this time. So that means that we will not be able to have anything out to the public and then incorporated into the 6-year improvement program within VDOT's schedule. So it will take, any action at this point would take place after VDOT adopts the final 6-year improvement program.
Mr. Gray, I think you indicated we could get away with that. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it won't show up in the approved 6-year program, but like I said, we amend stuff almost every day. So, you know, we could make an amendment whenever the TPO, whatever month they make a decision on this, we can work to make an amendment to the 6-year program.
Thank you. All right, well, let's do, yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say one other challenge that we've been having is that time continues to tick and new information continues to come to us. So the longer we take, the more information potentially will throw another puzzle piece in and change the puzzle that we're trying to put together.
Sure.
So I don't know if there's any, you know, decision or, you know, who makes that decision. We don't have anything in the Sdbg procedures that says there's a deadline for asking for additional funding. So
yeah. And I think, Christina, you and I have talked about that may be something we need to add later. But how about this, guys? I mean, I think that, you know, I have the ability to do it. What if we created a committee here, a subcommittee of the Michael and Christina, of course you would be there, but the project sponsors, and you guys can all sit there and look at it with the timelines, make sure all the information about when the localities need the money is there, whether or not anything can move, any altruism like Mr. Sexton has done would be helpful. And then that committee can develop a recommendation to us for us to consider. Does it seem reasonable?
Yes.
Okay.
With it.
Just to clarify, the project sponsors include who, Christina? It's probably one person from every locality.
yeah, and some of them are TTC members and some of them are not. So it's whoever my point of contact is for that project.
Yeah, I have no objection to that. Does anyone else? Or do you want one person from each locality in our group?
I think it'd be best to have the project manager.
Okay. All right. Then that let's try to do that. I don't think that requires a vote or anything.
No, we don't need a vote.
Okay. Then let's do that and we'll look at it again next time.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks for your patience, guys. I appreciate it. I know it's a long agenda. That will then take us to item 6, continued discussion on the TTC suggestions for economic development needs. Eddie?
Yes,
You there? I'm
I'm-
sorry. we kept you
I am
waiting.
still here. Yeah.
Some of us have a meeting after this meeting.
It's true. I heard about that. So we'll try to be quick. I will share a screen, which hopefully everyone can. Hopefully that's big enough for everyone to see. So a couple of weeks ago, well, I guess going back to the previous TTC meeting, we talked some about the needs that were identified for the TED study by the economic development staff and some of our sort of our business stakeholder groups that we had. We ranked those. We took, I believe it was a list of, I think there are 18 projects on here, and sent those out to the TTC along with the solutions that were suggested by the ED stakeholder group. Just call them C here. Along with solutions in progress that we had at that time. And we asked for TTC to add their own suggested solutions for each of these projects. We got back responses from the city of Roanoke and from county. The text in red on your screen in the spreadsheet is from Roanoke County. The text in blue is from Roanoke City. Those comments coming, I guess, directly from Megan Cronice and Mark Jameson. Go over those sort of quickly today. Some of the identified needs did not have solutions from the ED stakeholders. You have to remember those are the economic development folks. They have a little different viewpoint than the transportation people. So some of those, again, some of those needs did not have any suggested solutions from those. TTC column did fill up pretty nicely for the needs, or at least suggested solutions. I think we talked earlier about these first 3 being airport related. It seems like a lot of people on not only TTC but also TPO, there's some feeling that that there's not a lot of control that this group has on decisions made at the airport. We understand that the airport is important for economic development. People certainly support improvements, additional flights going out, things like that. As far as solutions coming from the TTC or from the sort of transportation folks, we might not get any for that. So that's, maybe as we go along, you consider if these projects really should have a slot in your priority list or not. It's just something to think about. A question on businesses having a hard time getting employers. Mr. Jameson asked, sort of commented that he wasn't sure that it belonged in the study. I think the reason that we included it was that a lot of the businesses and some of the economic development people talked about businesses trying to recruit employees and not being able to get new hires due to their personal transportation needs, and whether that's somebody that has to ride a bus to work, somebody that would like to walk to work. They don't. Everyone doesn't have a car. They don't have an alternative mode to getting to work. Is one of the issues. The other issue that some of the economic development people brought up was the increasing commute times that employers were looking at. New employers are coming into the area, and we had localities saying, the businesses are recruiting people from Martinsville, Lynchburg, Lexington, Blacksburg. I mean, people having a long commute. You have to decide if it's worth driving 60 to 90 minutes to get to a new job. That can be discouraging, I guess. So that was why that one was in there. That can probably be worded a little bit better and a little better defined. Congestion on 460 East. Some of the solutions in progress. I guess this is proposed for funding in round 4 smart scale projects for 11th Street to Gus Nix and intersection at alternate 220 need funding. I guess so suggested solutions. I can read these better without glasses. Fund and construct 11th Street to Gus Nix and the intersection improvements at alternate 220. The city identified that the STAR study is complete on this part, actually on both of these 460 projects. I guess the STAR study is complete. Next study being initiated for the 581 460 interchange. And we need to reserve Sdbg funding to provide flexibility to leverage for local match and smart scale. Hence the need to look at those numbers that we just spent the last 30 minutes discussing. Same thing with safety on Route 460 east of I-81 for the same suggestions on that. 220 going south, really only one way to go south, at least surface transportation wise, from Roanoke to Franklin County. Also the travel times being too long, Roanoke to North Carolina, Florida, ports in South Carolina. Solutions in progress, the alternative intersection projects, they're going on to make improvements along 220. Some of those are underway. I went through some construction last week on 220, and I'm assuming that some of that is part of those alternative intersection projects. Economic Development Group suggested building I-73. Everyone still wants I-73. I think we just had a meeting with our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee talking about priority projects, and ever since the President and Congress are sort of proposing another huge stimulus package, everyone's sort of eyeing that and thinking, oh, well, we'll be able to build I-73. So that came up again. As you know, it's been stated at least at one TPO meeting that I was at, and also sort of in one-on-one conversations, the I-73 is no longer a project. Funds been reallocated to alternative intersection projects. I think some of that money's also gone toward the work on Route 58, going from Stewart to Damascus. So I'm not sure what we do with I-73 at this point, or what do you do with 220 South? But that is something we can talk about. The next 3 are all sort of Woodhaven related, realizing that the Peters Creek interchange on 581 has been an issue for a long time. It was before Woodhaven was proposed as a sort of business park development. That left turning lane from Peters Creek on the Valley Point. The stacking in it has always been too short. There's the red light there. There's the additional traffic coming out from third lane, I guess. So that really encompasses probably 4 projects, 5 projects, at least from the economic development side. If you're looking at development of the Woodhaven site, improvements on Woodhaven to turn into the industrial site, getting up Valley Point Parkway, turning onto Valley Point Parkway, and then the I-581 and Peters Creek Interchange. So it's really at least probably 5 projects there. Solutions suggested for that. There is a study underway to look at that. And again, really the solutions being, making the improvements at the interchanges. what was listed from the city. Consideration should be given to addressing challenges with the Peters Creek Road interchange. That seems to be the greatest challenge at this point. Consideration should be given to addressing challenges at the interchange. Again, for all three of those. So that is sort of, and the Woodhaven Valley Point was identified by the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy as one of their at least top 20 projects right now. It's probably going to make it into a top 10 project list that they're going to have. Congestion on Route 419, limited number of entrances, cross access. This was brought up a couple of people during TED study interviews that we did. Ongoing solutions. Route 419 from Ogden to Route 220 is under construction, adding a third lane. Diverging Diamond Interchange project is funded at 419 and 220, which should also reduce congestion. I guess the additional suggestion was continue to analyze and propose potential improvements for Route 419 to reduce congestion and improve safety. One of the items that we heard on 419 was, I guess, with the adoption of the development and adoption of the Oak Grove plan, there are crossover and turning movement issues in that, I guess, community or neighborhood that should be addressed. And I think there were some suggestions in that plan for that. I-81, I-581 Orange Avenue interchange, merging on and off the interstate. Again, a VDOT STARS study has been initiated. I guess it's complete. Work remains to be done on projects that do not receive the smart scale funding. We need to reserve Sdbg funding, again, to provide flexibility for leverage, match, and smart scale. Long-term parking or Amtrak, non-attractive, not well signed, unreliable. No real solutions listed for that. That seems sort of like a city project or an Amtrak project. Some of the issues we heard were, people can't park close enough to the platform. Sometimes the garage adjacent to the platform is full. If you're coming from out of town, it's not clear where to go once you get off the train. Things like that. I don't know that that's really a TTC or transportation problem. Maybe it is, maybe not. And it's sort of similar to the next one. We talked about entrances to the localities and wayfinding issues. There's and that is really, how do you get people through town and get them to where they want to go, whether that's down to Center and the Square, the Transportation Museum, or up to the Blue Ridge Parkway, or trying to get them downtown to spend money in your local restaurants. And the solution to that's really finding funding sources to assess the localities and implementing Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge Wayfinding Plan, which is underway, and implementing a regional wayfinding sign program. I know most of the localities have looked at wayfinding. It can be difficult to place the signages, and it can be very expensive to pay for all the signs. So those were the suggested solutions that we had to all of those. I think today we wanted to ask TTC members for other, I guess, number one, are there questions or comments about any of the suggested solutions or solutions in progress? Is there anything we missed? Is there anything anyone wants to add to any of these?
Thank you, Eddie. Any discussion?
I guess I would ask if we could get a copy of that spreadsheet, because to be honest with you, it's a little hard to read on the screen.
Yes, and I apologize. We did send this, I guess, our survey out a little late, and the spreadsheet was put together yesterday, so everyone hasn't had a chance to sort of see it in person in front of them and have time to digest all of this. And maybe once you do, we'll have, you know, there may be some other suggestions or questions for it. So we can do that.
Thank you. Anything else?
I didn't have anything else.
All right. So Eddie, would it be all right with you if everybody kind of took the spreadsheet and looked at it again and got you any comments on that?
Yes, that would be good.
All right. Then I guess the rest of the group, anything else you want to talk about with 6 before we move on? Okay, hearing none. Thank you. I will move on to item 7, which is other business. I have no other business personally. Christina, do you have any other business?
No, Mr. Chair, I don't have any other business.
All right, thank you. 8, comments by members and or citizens. Do we have any citizens present? Any members?
Mr. Chairman, I think we do have some members present.
Sorry? You do have some, is that what you said?
Yeah, I think we have some members. This is Cody, and
yes,
in case you couldn't tell. I just wanted to share with the group, if most of you all hadn't read the newspaper article about some changes coming to Botetourt County, but one of the changes hidden in that article is that my last day with Botetourt County will be April 15th. So next Thursday. So yes, so this has been my last meeting representing Botetourt County on the TTC after 5 long, hard, strong years, 4 of course as chairman, more than enough. So thank you all for that time, and hopefully we'll get to work with you all very closely in the next endeavors. I can't say where I'm going yet. A public announcement with that hasn't been made, but it should come out possibly as early as next week. So thank you all for the good times, and I'm glad, as you said, Ben, that I could provide a little bit of altruism on my way out the door today. So.
Good comments for you. Well, Cody, I'm sorry to hear that you're leaving, but I wish you the very best. You know, certainly enjoyed working with you as vice chair. So thank you for everything that you've done for us. I hope we get to see you again.
Absolutely. Thank you all. And hopefully we've all been able to do our part to make the region a little bit better during that time. So thank you all.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'll just say thanks to Cody again, because he served as chair for many years and worked closely with me during that time. So thank you, Cody, for your service to this region in that capacity. We'll miss having you on the TTC.
Thank you, Christine. Anybody else? All right. Then I'm going to move us to item 9, which is adjournment. But as I understand, we're actually going